of those right now are built on fears of what's not possible. And so we are trying to really shift that direction, that thinking into, well, what do you have right now? What are the tools that you have, and how can we make that possible? But I've been very firm in the statement of, I'm going to work with you. If you need to call, if you need to have me visit your classroom virtually or even there in person to help you see what that configuration could look like, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it. Our team's going to do it. But designated ELD will happen. It will take place.
Rowena Mak, thank you again for joining. This is our second edition of the In This Together docuseries. We're happy to have you back representing Saddleback in California.
Thanks, Steve. I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. I want to go back to the last time we spoke, which was, I think, about 3 weeks ago now. And just, for the sake of full transparency, we had actually scheduled this about a week ago, but we said, you know what, let's wait because we'll know more after that.
Right.
So when did you start? We're recording this on September 3rd. I think this will be released the day after Labor Day. But when did you guys actually start school?
We started August 17th, actually.
Great. And so you've had a while now to kind of think about how things were going. And last time that we spoke, you were getting ready to implement that plan that called for remote learning to start the school year. You've kind of begun that journey at Saddleback. How is it going so far, just to start very generally?
I think for the most part, it is going a lot smoother than we thought it would. And we really attribute that to that diligent planning that everyone had over the summer. For all the unknowns, I think we tried to do our best to really plan for all of those unknowns. But at the same time, we really learned from the lessons that we had from the spring, and we put that into place for this year. So in terms of the actual structure of the class, the schedules, the learning management, the workflow, all of those things were meticulously planned for. And I feel that we are reaping the rewards of that planning.
Great. Yeah. And I guess I would ask you as a quick follow-up to that, what do you think the biggest lesson learned was from the spring of last year?
I would have to say the structure and communication. That was probably the biggest feedback that we got from both parents and even students and teachers. Things like, we need to understand what that day looks like. When are we Zooming? How often are we Zooming? Is that required? What's going to happen if I turn in work, not turn in work, all of those things. Where are you posting the work? All of those types of things really just, I think, added to the chaos and the uncertainty and just the uneasiness of people with the whole situation.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was an acute situation that happened very, very quickly. So to put those structures in place right away is difficult, but certainly something that you can, and clearly it sounds like you have done for this school year. And for those who have listened to the other episodes of this series, you know that communication and structure is an issue for everybody, no matter the size or geographical location of the district. So let's shift gears a little bit towards your English learners. Last time we talked, some of your concerns revolved around ensuring that distance learning didn't minimize learning opportunities for English learners, that there was still rigor in place, that they were still learning.
Right.
What are you observing now that school has kind of been going on for a while for those English learners, and how remote learning is going? I'd love to hear any sort of challenges and also opportunities and affordances that you've seen.
Sure. So right away, what we did was train the instructional assistants to really support the teacher right away in some initial assessment. That was important because we didn't have any LPAC scores. We didn't have any SBAC scores. And I think for as much as we would have wanted to say, begin ELD instruction on day one, I'm talking specifically for elementary, that would have really left a bad taste in teachers' palate. So I wanted them to be cognizant of it, to take those first couple of weeks for community building, for relationship building, for their ELs in particular, and just to really take stock of everything. Well, now things are ramping up after Labor Day is what I had told them, that after Labor Day, we're going to start the designated ELD that we had thought about, that we wanted to do. And so we have a lot of teachers making nervous phone calls to our office, a lot of nervous principals asking, how am I going to make that happen? And that might sound like a bad thing, but I really see that as a positive thing. The fact that they're worrying about it, the fact that they're anxious about it tells me that it's at the forefront of their planning and that there's intentionality that they want to put in place into that lesson implementation.
It's just so many parallels. Like, it, many people are talking about the idea of that people are receiving a lot of phone calls that maybe in the past didn't receive a lot of phone calls, or there's
Hmm.
demand for support for English learners, whereas before, there wasn't so much. I mean, that has to be in some ways really satisfying for you to be able to see that collaboration happening,
Hmm.
be able to see people. I don't know, maybe I'm being dramatic here when I say kind of coming out of the woodwork,
Right.
chat with you about these students.
Yeah, I would have to say, like I said in the previous episode, I only see optimism coming out of this. Because for the longest time, we've been preaching, the folks at the district office and leadership team and teacher leaders, the importance of ELD instruction. And it's not that we have been ignored, but it probably was not being implemented at the level and at the pace that we wanted it to. Well, then this thing happened, and we're really trying to leverage our situation and the resources that we have, which I think maybe we'll get to talk a bit about later, to really support the EL. So that's why I'm nothing but optimistic for the outcome of this for our ELs.
Yeah, and so you're kind of getting into the next point here, and you sort of teased it a little bit when you talked about after Labor Day, how that's kind of
Mhm.
when we really need to start beginning to focus about instruction. And again, you're not alone there. Everybody's focusing on community building, relationship building, which I think is hugely important as an investment in learning in the future, and just to kind of get to know one another is so important as well. But you talked about last time putting those systems into place to support teachers working with English learners,
Mhm.
particularly as it pertains to differentiating instruction. I know you said that most of that is happening sort of after Labor Day,
Right,
but have you
right.
seen any of that play out yet, like in any sort of places? And if so, how's it looked? And if not, what do you anticipate it looking like?
At the elementary level, probably not at the level of detail that I think we're going to see in a couple of weeks, right? Also, a variable that happened, as you may know, Steve, here we are, we just got back in distance learning, and the governor announced that we may be able to go back to in person instruction.
The
So that,
roller coaster ride continues.
right. So that's like, wait, we're just trying to get used to the distance learning. How are we going to shift this into hybrid instruction? And see, when you start introducing variables like that to people, you have to help them get to the headspace that it's not so much different than what we planned for distance learning. So really, let's just take stock, let's be calm and kind of say, what is it that I have, what is it that what I need to do, and things like that. But to go back to your question for differentiation, I would say I'm probably seeing that more at the secondary level for the ELD teachers specifically. Just yesterday, I met with my team to check in with our secondary ELD teachers next week. And what we're going to do at that time is, yes, we're going to talk about logistics. Do your students have access? Are you seeing them engage and things like that? But I also want us at the end of that conversation to be able to set some goals. And that may seem like, what? Come on, Rowena, are you really going to keep us accountable and things like that? But I do that to help us not only be focused, but also so that they have time to reflect on their wins as teachers. Because if we don't know where we're going or how we've impacted students, that's not really going to be helpful for anyone. But that group of teachers in particular, we put very specific structures in place of how they're going to differentiate and how they are going to use data to support whatever tier one or tier two supports that the students are going to be getting. So I would like to say in a couple of weeks, I probably have more concrete information as to how that's playing out because a lot of planning is happening right now.
Yeah, next episode. That's what I figured, and I think that's generally what's happening. But it's nice to kind of think about where you hope to be in a couple weeks from now, and setting those goals for teachers is important, as important it is for setting the goals for the students as well. I think. Um, and this may be an early question too, but one of the things that people are concerned about right now is ways of developing oral proficiency
Mhm.
online. I'll structure the question the same way. One, have you seen any of that yet happening? Maybe in those relationship building activities, I don't know.
Mhm.
And if so, how's it going? And if not, what are the plans to kind of move forward with that?
Sure. I think the structures and strategies are in place, and that's a big credit to what we did in the spring in really training teachers and helping them understand that oral proficiency practice can be had and probably can be even more effective at the individual level using instructional technology tools. So those things are in place. So we're not in a place anymore of what do I do, what do I use, and things like that. Teachers are using them. So it's just a matter, I think, again, in the next few weeks to really ask teachers to take stock of its effectiveness.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, you were, I think, very optimistic last time we talked about the affordances of remote
Mhm.
learning, and there's a lot of people who are saying. I just spoke with a gentleman yesterday, Stephen Fleener, who's out of Texas. He's an expert on English learners and
Mhm.
STEM and how they can really thrive in these STEM courses. And he said
Sure.
something interesting. He sort of took it to a extreme. He said, I feel kind of bad saying this, but the longer this thing goes on, the better off we're going to be in the long
Right,
run.
right.
And you reminded me of you because I don't think you said that in that way, but you
Yeah,
definitely sort of alluded to that in the last conversation
right.
that we had. Um, so I'm curious if you've seen in the last couple of weeks since we last talked any of those affordances kind of come to fruition. If you have any examples of it or how things are
Sure.
going that might help others.
So I may have mentioned during the first episode that in addition to overseeing our services for English learners department, I also coordinate our MTSS efforts. So what I'm seeing is that we're able to leverage this situation and again the resources that we're having to actually build out our MTSS framework. So particularly for the academic interventions. So we've always talked about, okay, well, we just got to focus on tier 1 and first best instruction. We're going to get to tier 2 and tier 3 at some point, and there's this sense of urgency that no, this is going to happen right now. So just in the last couple of weeks, we've been able to purchase programs such as iReady, iExcel. Those are diagnostics and assessments, and other programs that we're using at the teacher and the site level. And we're very determined and decisive in terms of what are the cutoff scores or what are those indicators that would signal to us that a student needs help. And we've also put plans in place for when that support is going to happen and who is going to provide that support, including hiring some intervention teachers. I mean, those are things that we could only have dreamt of back in the days. I say back in the days. So yeah, I hate to agree with the individual you spoke with yesterday, but I truly see this as a blessing in disguise because I'm like, finally we can do this. Finally we can serve students. And so yeah, I'm excited for those affordances, like you said.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that. And the next question that I want to ask you is about families and family engagement. But I'll preface that question by saying that um, in a couple of the interviews that I've done for this edition of In This Together series, people have talked about their parent portals, whatever that may be, whatever tool
Mm,
they're using, like absolutely exploding in demand. And parents,
mhm.
not unlike the teachers that you were talking about earlier, parents like clamoring to say, "Hey, I need to know how to use this thing, because I need to
Right?
communicate." And so all of a sudden, not only is family engagement put in the spotlight, but
Yeah.
they're actually coming to us. And
Right.
and and they said it in the same way that you said it, which was, it may sound like it's difficult for us, and it is. We have these giant Zoom calls now. We have all
Mhm.
kinds of people that want information, and we don't necessarily have the staff to be able to supply the demand that we need to in a timely way, but they're all working really hard to make it happen. And the great thing is that you have collaboration happening now that didn't
Right.
happen before, which is
Absolutely.
a silver lining of this whole thing. So you're not the only one saying it, and I think we may get to a point now where we don't have to say, "I feel bad saying this," but but I feel the same way. So it's a really interesting parallel that I'm seeing in a lot of conversations that I'm having. So let's get to that family piece, because you actually brought up something that not a lot of people had, but that I have witnessed sort of as a parent myself and in talking with lots of different people from lots of different schools. And that is, and I'll quote you by saying that the fickleness of families,
Mhm.
the surveys that were sent out and were flip-flopping all over the place. And then when it became reality, you
Right.
finally had a concrete answer. So I'm curious about if at this point things have leveled off, if
Mm.
families feel more secure in the decisions that you all have made, if they feel like stable, like things aren't going to change tomorrow, especially in light of the news that you just shared with us that the governor said possibly you could go back to school. I mean, how are they
Right.
doing with this whole thing?
Well, the fickleness is definitely gone, but that's because there's no more window for selection of choice of the model that you want. That's done. Input is done. The window for that is done. So I feel that families are reckoning with, like you said, the reality of what's actually going to happen. So, whereas in the past few weeks or earlier in the summer, the questions or the emails that we're getting from families are things like, so I know that ultimately you're going to decide on what to do, but let me just tell you what I think you should do, right? It's no longer that. It's now really being engaged in our return to school plans. We did a huge rollout of our return to school plans that did not only involve communications through print, but we videotape in English and Spanish what those plans entailed. We followed up with site admin and bilingual parent advocates and all things like that. So we're finding that in the communication front, we have done that. And I think that parents are understanding that, okay, I guess that is the plan. Now let me understand what to expect when my student is actually in the classroom, be that in person or virtually.
Yeah, just a shift. And, I think it's whatever the stages are, you get to a certain stage where it's just acceptance. And then
Right.
you know,
That's
you,
what it is.
yeah, yeah. I don't know the stages that I'm alluding to, but I'm sure somebody does. But
Right.
yeah, but you just accept it and then you move on. But you can't accept it until a decision has been made. And I think
Right.
it feels like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like your district did a really good job in saying, decision's been made, we live with it,
Right.
and we move on instead of flip flopping. I've definitely witnessed, I think to no fault of the district where my kids go, it's just they're dealing with all kinds of different circumstances. But there has been a lot of flip flopping. And I think if
Mhm.
I had not been an educator for so long and didn't really understand all of the challenges, that it may have frustrated me. It definitely frustrated others. But we're now at a point where my kids start September 8th and we know what's happening. And we're just like, okay, it's happening this way. We're going to function this way. So that's
Mhm.
good. But you have to be decisive, and not everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah, and that's tough because there are neighboring districts, right? And parents want to, through no fault of their own, pick and choose the best elements of what they're hearing from other districts are doing and say, can we combine the best of the best and make that work for us? And that's just not going to be possible. So we take stock of the current our environment, our surroundings, and who are we serving, and really the best offerings that we can have for the group that we have.
So, one of the whole premises of what we're trying to do here, or goals, is to talk with people about how English learners are being sort of, serviced and taken care of during this situation, especially
Hmm.
around the idea of equity.
Right.
You're clearly setting your students up for an equitable learning experience by doing the things that you're doing, and like you said, the real instruction sort of starts to come after Labor Day. So I guess I'll ask the question in this way. Do you feel that your English learners are now set up for an equitable experience in remote learning?
Absolutely. So I had the unique opportunity to be part of the team that developed our learning continuity and attendance plan, which is so funny. The acronym for it is also LCAP, which was the old version of the document
Yeah,
that we had to develop because, just please continue to confuse us.
love the
But
acronyms, alphabet
right.
soup.
But that is, of course, the root of that is SB 98 and what that legislation specifically asks for in the types of things that districts must do to ensure that learning is still happening despite of all the unknowns. And there are very specific call outs there for English learners. And you really can't get away from it because I feel that you just can't give this company line of, yes, we continue to be committed for English to English learners and things. It asks very specific questions. How do you know that you need to do this? What are you going to do when you know that? What are the tools that are you going to do when you know that? How are you going to continue to measure? I mean, it's just, persistent, which I like because it really challenged us. So we developed that learning continuity attendance plan, and a huge component of it is for English learners. So yes, the plan is in place, the system is set up. It would just be a matter for us to support the teachers and the sites in actually implementing those.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you said earlier, those teachers are at this point really interested in making sure that they're able to support those students.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Um, Here's a simple question that may not have a simple answer. What has been the biggest surprise that you've come across over the last few weeks since we've talked?
The biggest surprise, so attendance was huge for us at the secondary level. And I think that in the spring, we said, okay, we're not really going to take attendance. We're not really going to get grades because we really has to be no harm and things like that. And I think some of us were thinking, yes, that is great. But at some point, there has to be a reason for students to come back, especially at the high school level. And I'm one of those educators that thought, guys, we don't have to worry about it. They're gonna come back for the love of learning. Not everyone works in that carrot and stick kind of mentality. And we had very few students participate. And this time around, attendance is recorded, there are grades, and all of a sudden I'm asking teachers at the secondary level, hey, is attendance and engagement still a problem? Absolutely not. All my kids are here. So I'm like, come on, I was really hoping to be wrong.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty there because clearly, just from the conversations that you and I have had, I think I think one of the probably many things that we have in common is that we believe that education needs to be changed, and a big
Right.
part of that is making sure that there's intrinsic motivation and that
Mm-hmm.
there are affordances of remote learning that might provide some intrinsic motivation that the traditional system um, doesn't provide.
Right.
But there is certainly something to be said about recording attendance and
Right.
and grading. It's just it's you could get into a whole political argument about this.
Yeah.
It's like right versus left, but you have to be able to compromise and understand that there are valid pieces to both sides. So
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think it's important to understand because I would probably been in your camp. Like, oh no,
Right.
it'll be fine. Like, well,
Right.
but boy, I mean, it takes a lot for a
It
student
does.
to log on to a computer and be on Zoom, and it's not easy. And I think many of us are maybe looking through this with some rose-colored glasses on.
I think too that yes, the attendance and the grading, their teachers are much more confident this time around, right? It may be in the spring, they're like, my teacher doesn't even know how to put us in breakout rooms in Zoom, and I'm not understanding. It's all of this stuff going on. Well, a lot of professional development has happened since, and they've got it together now. So I think that level of confidence and consistency and coherence in instruction, I'd like to also think is a factor in, for students to be like, okay, we mean business again.
Well, yeah, that's important. Like knowing that your teacher is not only an expert in their content area and an expert in education in general and relationship building and social emotional, all the things that they need to do, but they are highly proficient in the tools that they are using,
Right.
which they always have been. But being forced to do all these things in the spring made some difficult challenges, of course. But it's great to hear now that
Right.
that they're more proficient in that. How much of that, by the way, do you think is a direct result of training that you all have provided? And how much of it is just that they realized as educators that they needed to kind of figure this out on their own?
Oh, huge. We pushed out so much professional development. It was unbelievable. From the district leadership team in ed services to site academic coaches, that's all we were doing every time, every day, several of them. In fact, teachers were having problems with overlaps of which PD to attend because they wanted to do this, but they wanted to do that as well. So if there's anything, we could never be accused of not providing enough professional development to support teachers. And I think we're backing it up now because they learned that, hey, this is effective for me. Can the district buy district licenses for teachers, for instance, because we saw the advantages of it. And in the past, we may have been like, guys, just go with the demo version or the basic version. But this time, we really want to be supportive. And we're saying, no, yes, we're going to provide that for you. If you tell us that is what you need, we're going to do that for you.
Yeah, you talk about an investment at times like these when funds can be scarce, but you realize what's important at the end of the day.
Right.
And that's the students. And in order to deliver the content and whatever you need to the students, you need the right tools,
Mm-hmm.
just like anybody else. Um, so you're about to enter your quick math fourth week, it seems
Mm-hmm.
like.
That's right.
Um, what's top of mind for you right now? Like, what's your biggest, if there was something that were kind of nagging at you and you're really thinking
Mhm.
about, what is it right now?
Designated ELD at the elementary level.
I could have guessed it.
Yes. So I just really got to help teachers and principals, like I said, get into that right headspace. Because right now, the conversation is really about why this is not possible. This is not possible because students are not going to be able to move from their seats to my horseshoe table over there in the corner. So I'm not going to be able to serve them as a group. This is not going to work because the only way we can do grouping is if we put all the ELs in one corner. And the optics of that would be bad because all the minorities are in one corner where the non ELs are in the rest of the class and things like that. So all of those right now are built on fears of what's not possible. And so we are trying to really shift that direction, that thinking into, well, what do you have right now? What are the tools that you have and how can we make that possible? But I've been very firm in the statement of I'm going to work with you. If you need to call, if you need to have me visit your classroom virtually or even there in person to help you see what that configuration could look like, I'm going to do it. We're going to do it. Our team's going to do it. But designated ELD will happen. It will take place.
Yeah, I love what you said. I mean, hopefully it's not happening too much, but fear of what is not possible.
Right.
It can be so crippling. It really can, especially in situations like this. Not everybody is looking at a situation like this, as an opportunity. And even if you are looking at it as an opportunity, that opportunity might seem far away. And now we
Mm.
have to deal with the acute challenges that we're dealing with. And I feel like that's where leadership comes in,
Right.
right? And that's where having people who are enthusiastic and who are maybe comfortable with this support others and show them that it can be done. And I certainly hope that it sounds like that's what's happening there, which is good.
Yeah, I am very excited to let you know what that looks like in the next few weeks.
You just teed up my next question perfectly. So my next question, the last question that I have for you is, we'll talk again in a couple weeks.
Mhm.
I want to know what you hope to be highlighting at that point.
What I hope to be highlighting at that point are the surprises that teachers have and how possible this can actually be. On the wins that they share with us that you're not going to believe what happened. I was able to do these things. Or, hey, Rowena, you're right. Not that I need to be right. It is possible, right? And this is how I work through those things so that those logistical things are aside and we can get back to talking about actual instruction. We got to get back our conversation to like beyond logistics, beyond planning. I understand we need to do that right now, but then by the next episode, we probably would have been back in-person instruction to some sort of a hybrid model. And so that's where really going to be the test is how ELD instruction is happening now that we've settled in.
Well, as the last person to complete the second round of the interviews, I will say that I think everybody has said something like that when I've asked that
Mhm.
question. We hope to be talking about instruction. So we'll see. I think we will be, but we'll leave it at that. and come back in a couple weeks and sort of see where the conversation goes from there. But Rowena Mak, thank you again for joining us in the second episode. It was great to catch up with you. It sounds like things are going really well. Hopefully there were some things in there that others were able to take out and use on their own. And we look forward to catching up with you in a couple weeks.
Thanks for sharing the conversation.